Well, I knew when I started writing, I wanted to have the different perspectives. I really like writing in that manner. And, I'd really envisioned a book within a book, a true crime book within the fictional book.
Welcome to our latest Book Reporter Talks to interview with our guest, Heather Gudenkauf. Her novel, The Overnight Guest, which is her ninth book, is a Book Reporter Bets On selection that I read in one day, last Monday, completely immersed in this book, put a fire in the fireplace, and I said, that's it. This is what I'm going to do. This is my mission for the day. And oh my gosh, what an experience. I've been a fan of Heather's work since her debut book, The Weight of Silence, came out in 2009. Oh my gosh, that feels like so long ago. I feel like I read that book yesterday, and it was an instant New York Times bestseller. We met years ago at an industry event, and although we haven't had time to catch up in person for a while, and it's been a few years since we've seen each other, I am so glad to have you here today. So welcome, Heather.
Thank you so much, Carol. It's so good to see you.
Oh my gosh. And we don't have a drink in our hands and looking for the canopy table, because that's all we're going to eat at the conference is finger foods. I always used to get home from a conference. My husband said, what you want for dinner? And I said, anything that requires utensils, because that we had spent the entire time. So every time I saw you, it was like a drink and a canopy. There we go.
That's right. Yeah. Those were the days, right? Miss those days.
And we just sit there and say, oh, we're going to go from one event to the other. And now we go to no events. It's just completely different. Yeah. So let's start by you telling us about The Overnight Guest and trying to capture for people why I read it in a day last Monday.
Sure. Yes. So The Overnight Guest is the story of Wylie. She is a true crime writer who travels to Iowa and to a remote farmhouse in order to finish her latest project. And while she's there, of course, the 100-year blizzard hits while she's there working, and she opens up her front door during the blizzard and stumbles upon a child nearly frozen to death in the snow. So of course she brings that child in, and there's the whole mystery surrounding where that child came from, what they're doing out there, what she's going to do with this young person. And then that's interwoven with the account of the true crime that Wylie is writing about. So we go back 20 years in time and we learn about the people involved and the victims and the families, and how this horrific crime that took place in the exact same farmhouse where Wylie is staying impacts this entire community. And then there's a third perspective that I don't like to say a whole lot about, but there's a third perspective that as the story moves along, it kind of ties everything together.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And you don't really know why you're reading that. Well, we'll get into that. We're going to get into that. Well, let's start with, every book starts with an idea. There's something that sits there and says, what if? So where was the catalyst on this one? Because it could be any one of the three storylines that are going to come together. So which was the first?
Well, the first one for me is I was doing what many people, I think, do when they're looking for story ideas. I'm always listening to the news or reading the newspaper, and I was perusing some websites, those websites that are like the 10 strangest crimes in your state, or the 10 craziest things that happened in your state. Well, I was looking through different Midwest websites and content like that. And I came across one that was about it happened early 1980s. A young woman was traveling through a snowstorm, slid off the road into a ditch, and it was 20 below zero, snowing. She decided she was going to walk the 2 miles to get help. Well, she gets out of the car, she's walking, and just as she's about ready to reach the front steps, she collapses. She isn't found for 6 more hours. Her eyes are frozen open. The people who found her could not get her into the cab of a pickup truck. She was frozen so solidly. They had to put her in the back of a car. Miraculously, she survived. she survived, but the hypodermic needles that the doctors were trying to use were breaking. And that was really like where the idea came from in general, like, okay, I've got to set a story in a snowstorm where it's bitter cold. And of course it evolved from there and ended up quite different, but that's where the basic idea came from.
Wow. What a story. I think I've got to start looking at ideas in my state. Like, what happened? What is the craziest thing that's happened? Oh my gosh. Well, the isolated house is also the perfect setup for this book. And then the snow. Like, okay, we first have isolated house. So I'm trying to remember, is this your first locked room thriller? Because that's really what the beginning of the story is.
I'm trying to think, gosh, after 9, I mean, I think I've had other books where, people are isolated, at least for parts of the book, but this one was really, truly, everything took place in this story, this part of the story within the house or within the yard of the house. Yeah. So,
and every once in a while somebody drives by, but they don't drive by often. It's just very, very, very isolated. And we know that's not just isolated physically, because you ramp it up, because there's no Wi-Fi, there's no internet. And by the early pages of the book, our protagonist, Wylie, has done the thing that you just know is going to have huge consequences. She has broken her phone. And this is all like way at the beginning of the book. I think we're on like page 18 by the time all this has happened. So the high stakes are there like right from the start. Did that opening like just come to you and help you push the writing through? Like, was that always that cold open of here we are?
Yeah, well, I knew that I wanted to start off with a bang. I wanted, people to really get that feeling of being almost claustrophobic and isolated. And, in this day and age, it's really hard to do that with our characters with, modern technology, cell phones, internet, everything. So I had to find a way that I had to strip Wylie of all those resources. And what better way than a blizzard? And those things can actually happen in a good old fashioned blizzard. We've lost power. We've had storms here where the cell towers have gone down. And so right away, we know she's on her own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's on her own and she's completely stuck. So she's also a true crime writer. Are you a true crime fan? Because I'm completely taken with any podcast that I hear about this, documentaries and books about true crime. And you've got me. Like if you say true crime, I am there. So I'm just picturing her being this kind of writer.
Absolutely. And I'm like you, Carol, that I'm, give me the podcasts, the documentaries, the true crime books, Dateline, whatever. I'm all here for it. And, we as a society are pretty obsessed with it. And I thought, well, I'm not a true crime writer. I write fiction, but I can put a true crime writer in my book. And that's exactly what I decided to do.
Yeah. And, so many times those are like, what if, like, and then what happened? And you hear the suspenseful music. I mean, believe me, there were times I was hearing choruses coming up as I was reading your book of da 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 da. Here's what's going to happen next. Don't open the door. Don't go there. Yes. Believe me, you had it so there. The book is so layered that the backstory comes to us quickly. Like we're right in that backstory fast, and it's really intense. And with that, the reader gets engaged like really quickly because it's this horrific story of what happened. I don't want to give too much away. We're not going to do that. And that was enough of a thriller there. So we've got the farmhouse part, which is a thriller unto itself. And then we've got this other part of this crime that happened 20 years ago. Did you edit that story to be that tight, like that you knew you were going to have those pieces like interlocking like that?
Well, I knew when I started writing, I wanted to have the different perspectives. I really like writing in that manner. And, I'd really envisioned a book within a book, a true crime book within the fictional book, as the other part of the book. So I wanted, because I do have such an admiration for that gift, that skill of writing. As with all my books, there's a lot of editing that goes into it. So I wrote a lot. I mean, there's a lot more of that backstory of the 20-year-old crime that ended up on the cutting room floor. But I knew that I wanted to weave them together in a tight way. So, the reader is just kind of like whiplash back and forth of what happened then, what's happening now, and are these stories going to come together in some way? And so it took some time to get there, but I did know that's where I wanted to go.
Yeah, where you want it to be. But, and, you know, it's also, as you're reading now, as you're reading page proofs, as you're reading the galleys, as you're reading things going along, you're sitting there thinking about the parts that were cut. And you're going, is there enough there on the page? And there definitely is. But in your head, it's, and then there was the ice cream, and then there was this, and then there was that, all these other pieces. But now you're reading like this kind of stripped down, super tight version. As you're reading the page proofs, are you thinking about, okay, is everything there that needs to be there? Or does that happen so much sooner in the process?
You know, it happens, you know, throughout the process. So I'm one of those writers that, you know, I'll get everything. I say I write ugly. I get everything down on the paper and it's just there. And then I start peeling away and I tuck some of the scenes into a cut file. And then, you know, I get my early readers and my editor who, you know, has great ideas and great thoughts. So, you know, every once in a while, I definitely mourn losing some of those scenes because you work hard on them and they're part of the story, whether they end up on the page or not. So, you know, I always say it pinches a little when you have to say goodbye to some of those scenes, for sure.
I think there could be bonus tracks on the website. And don't look at the bonus tracks until after you've read the book. Or hear the bonus track. It's like with music, you know what I mean? Here are the bonus tracks. And I remember a couple of years ago, Paul Simon put out a greatest hits album. And in it, he also put the outtakes from some of the sessions. And it's how the words were really in the song at the beginning and how this was really happening. And it was fascinating to see the process that happened along the way. So I'm up for bonus tracks, like anytime, you know?
That's a great idea. I'd have
bonus.
It'd be pretty messy, but
it could be like, up on the website, don't read, do not open until you've read the book. Like, do not go there. You know? It's close to the start of the book, as you said, we've got this young child frozen out in the snow. I mean, and she is trying to get this child to come inside, I didn't see that coming. And it emptied, and, you know, at the thriller ante, like so early. It's like, this child, who is it? Did you have that nailed from the start that we were going to have somebody out in the snow? I mean, the fact that she just sees this child and then has to coerce this child to come towards the house. And then you feel her going out in the snow on this investigative mission of how did the child get here? Was it a snowy day as we were writing this, or were you just thinking cold in the summer?
Well, you know, it's funny. You know, I had a vision for the book. So I knew that there were going to be 2 seasons. The crime of 20 years before was set in the dead of summer, really hot. And then the wintry scenes. I wrote I started with the summer scenes, even though I knew I had winter scenes coming. And I started and got quite a bit of that done. And then when winter hit, I started in on the icy, blizzardy scenes. And a couple winters ago, when I was writing this, it was really, you know, even into last year, it was really snowy and cold. So I had lots of material to work with.
Let's go stand in the yard, see how it feels, sit out there for a half hour, see how we come in the house. How frozen am I, you know?
Yeah, I took my dog Lolo and we bundled up and we went out in bitter cold weather. And, you know, I was thinking, boy, Wylie was out here longer than I was. and I'm pretty cold.
And the dog is now lobbying for a new coat. It's like after this book, I deserve a new coat, you know, for all my research help that I did. You know, what we really don't know a lot is Wylie's present day situation. We really are. That's the one thing that I went back and I said, did I miss something or whatever? And it's beyond this moment of the farmhouse. And we have a little, like, she's got some husband that she's away from. We know that she's got a son that is definitely at odds with her, but we really don't know more. Was that on purpose to really just say, like, we're not going to know that much about Wylie. We're just going to, she lives in a different part of the country. That's about all we know about her. And she's this true crime writer.
Yeah, it was definitely purposeful. You know, I wanted the readers to get the Wylie that the community got. You know, she came into this community, she never really connected with anybody. She did her business at the grocery store and went back to the farmhouse where she could isolate herself and work. And so very slowly, little snippets of who Wylie is and where she came from and her life in the Northwest, what that was like. But she really guards herself, and that's part of her personality too. So she only lets people know what she wants them to know.
Mm-hmm. And you guard her from us. You guard her from us very, very well. So the time frame alternates between now and 2000. And, you have to think about what was relevant in 2000, what people were wearing, what they were doing. Did you write, okay, you said you wrote, you thought summer first. So did you write that whole time frame first and then switch to the other, or were you doing both sort of simultaneously?
I started with the summer timeline in the past first, and I wrote not the whole book, probably about a third of it, where I just felt like I had a good solid start, but it was itching to also get into Wylie's story as well, and wanted to make sure that I had the flow of when I was going to weave parts in. So then I started in on the winter scenes and then went back and forth. But I had a good start on each before I started really jumping back and forth.
Going back and forth. Yeah, it was. And it's interesting because you really did have to talk about two different times. Like, okay, this one can't have this. They can have this. They were dressed like, and being summer and winter, having it being such opposite seasons, you really knew where you were when you were in each a part of the story as a reader. Like you weren't saying, oh, like, where am I now? I'm freezing. That's where I am.
That's right.
So the ending's super fast paced and very, very, very edgy. And I was glad the lights were on when I was reading it. And I was saying, okay, I am not alone in the house. Everybody is with me, because it happens very, very briskly. And there's one twist, by then, the rest is still to come. And it goes boom, boom, boom. Did you know the pacing at the beginning, or did you really crunch on that during the editing process?
I think, my goal is to have that, I want the reader to feel that same heart pounding suspense that the characters are. So my goal is to have that pace at the end of a book, but it needs to be worked with a bit. The editing process, like I mentioned, is huge for me, and going back and making sure, taking out anything that's not necessary, adding in that a little bit more of the suspense to it. It's an ongoing joke between my editor and myself. I like to put food in my books, and my characters like to eat. But, when they're in this kind of situation, they're not thinking a whole lot about food. And so I had to pull away some of those scenes too.
We're going to have a sumptuous dinner now. I don't think so. There's no power. There's no this. Right. The lights are flickering. I'm not quite sure you're going to do that, but that would be so much fun. You go cook dinner, come back to the book later. There you go.
That's right.
It was just so fast paced towards the end. I mean, it's not that any part of the book is slow, but that was just like, where am I? And wait a second, all these people, it was just so good.
Thank you.
Once the book, do you say, done? Or like, do you still sit there and say, I can tweak? And at what point do you stop? Do they tell you can't tweak anymore? Do they hit a hard stop with you?
Well, working with an editor, we work very closely. We work really well together and are able to bounce ideas off of each other. And, I really, give it 100% in, during the whole process, but especially during the revision process, when it's getting close to the end and they need the final product. I always am willing to go as long as my publisher tells me keep going or keep tweaking. But when they say it's good to go, I'm pleased with that. And it's usually a big whew, and off into the next set of hands. And they'll come back with copy edits and, little tweaks here and there. But I feel like when we get to that point, we're almost there and I'm good to go.
You're good to go. Yeah. So this was a very different editing time for you as well. Like you usually edit and get notes from somebody, but this time you could have the opportunity to Zoom and talk about the changes instead of just doing a phone call. Was that something you did with your editor? Because it's something we didn't have until pandemic times,
we did the phone call, and we do great with that. We just found a time and we would talk for length of time often. And it was really good, just by bouncing ideas off of one another. But you're right, when I, connecting with my agent or other writers, we have this tool now that's really so much fun, and we get to put our eyes on each other, and it's really nice. It's really a nice thing.
Yeah, you think about the editor who usually when they're in the office and they're going to have a call with you, there are other things going on around them in the office. And now when you're home, it's just you, it's just them on the phone with you. There's like zero distraction. And I think that as we think about going back to where we were or some new breed of what it was, it's going to be very interesting to see how people do that. It's like, I'm going to stay home and do phone calls today with authors. I don't need to be in the office for this or whatever.
Right. It's just opened up a whole new way of doing business. And there's some, out of everything terrible, there are some good things that come. And I think this makes us think about working a little bit more creatively. Mm-hmm. And that's always a good thing.
Yeah. Working with each other different, in such a different way. All of your books have been set in Iowa. And you actually have this map. I was on your site this morning of where the different books have been set. Like, hit this, and then we'll say like which one it was, but they're not really real towns. Like everything's not really set in a real town. So tell us about this. First of all, Iowa, because it's home and because you know it well. And also these locations that you create yourself, which I absolutely love.
Thank you. Yes, I love my home state. As people think of it as a flyover state and, flat land with corn, which it is, but we also have, it's a beautiful landscape as well. We've got bluffs and the river, Mississippi River, Missouri River. We've got caves, and so it's been really fun for me to share my home state with other people through my books. I really love doing that as well. They are fictional towns, but if you know the area, if you know Iowa, there are a lot of nods to real places. I mean, it's some of the towns are pretty thinly veiled in my account of them. So people know. People know,
Sarah, what's going on. What's going on. So you say these messy first drafts, and then you start playing around with everything. And are messy first drafts typed? Are they handwritten? What's the first draft looking like?
For me, I've always started longhand. But I don't, it's not efficient. So I don't go very far with that because I do have deadlines but there is something about putting my hand to paper and handwriting. That really seems to get things flowing for me. So I always start with a notebook and take notes on the characters and ideas and plots. And then I'll transfer that over to the computer, of course. Mm-hmm. Whenever I get stuck, I'll go back to longhand and, do some scenes and maybe some full chapters that way. And that just seems to shake things loose a little bit for me. I think getting out from behind the keyboard helps sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Well, the keyboard, it's like when you first started with Word years ago, the flashing light would be looking at you like this. And it's like, I have nothing. Like I really have nothing. But I felt like the flashing light was just making me feel so guilty that I couldn't write or put anything down on the page, no matter what I was composing. Yet I have the world's worst handwriting, really the world's worst. I mean, I type notes that go inside sympathy cards. I mean, it is that bad. So I always sit there and say to authors, oh, wow, your handwriting must be impeccable that you could go back and read these later on, like read what you actually wrote. For me, it would be, what is this cave person writing on the page? So I take a good penmanship.
Well, I have the potential, but when you get going, the thoughts are flowing. So there's definitely been times where I've like, what did I write here? I have no idea.
Why are these words?
Yeah.
So for your characters too, like, do you draw like what the house is that Wylie's in? Because the house really matters, like where the house is situated, how far it is from the road, I can't give anything away. And then also in the 2000 story, what the house was like there, what the cornfield is like there. Do you have little sketches of yourself, because it's going to take them that long to get there? And if they were looking, they could see or not see or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I draw maps, but usually I don't draw the map until I get a little bit into it, until I can kind of picture it more. But yeah, I draw maps of where the tree is. There's an interesting tree in the book, and the gravel roads and where it is in relation to the town and other towns. So yeah, I do. I'm not an artist, but I do have to have those visuals to help me.
And the tree, when people read, they're going to get what we're talking about. The tree is such an important part of what's going on. But you also wonder, after all these years, well, why that tree is still there, like why that has not been completely rerouted and taken down, you know?
Yeah, there's a real tree in Iowa that, so what we're referring to, and this doesn't give anything away really, but there's a tree in the book that it's grown up in the middle of a where gravel road crosses. So it's in the middle of a rural intersection, and it's a full grown 80-year-old tree, at least 80 years old. And people just kind of yield and go around it when they do run into other traffic. But there's a tree just like that in Western Iowa, northwestern Iowa. And when I saw it, I thought, oh, I have got to include this in the book. And it's just a fun story of how it got there and why it's still there.
Yeah, I just think I think we can use a few more flashing lights on this, that way it's coming up or things like that. Tree ahead. Like I've never seen a road sign that said tree ahead, caution. Yeah, go road goes around tree. I haven't seen that. So it's like, really, really fun. Yeah. Now, I remember reading someplace that you were born, I think it was on your website, with a profound hearing loss. And as a result, did you observe more closely as a child? And is your sense of seeing and looking at things, because for a while there, it was like trying to interpret what was going on, what was happening in a room. So am I right on that?
Well, I think so. Yeah, I was born, I have a profound hearing loss. I can hear, but the kind of hearing loss I have makes it really difficult for me to understand things in crowded rooms and in classrooms. So school was tough for me early on. And I have to really pay attention to who's talking and look at their face and all those good things. But, as a result, I was very much an observer, sitting back and watching and, taking it all in. And I think I try to do that with my books. And give that eye view of what's being seen and all the senses there as well. So yeah, I think so. I think, visual, trying to convey that visual sense through my writing.
Because you see the places are so well drawn. I mean, I feel like I was in the house. I feel like I was going up towards the road. But in the other story, I felt like I was there as well. And the writing is very visual. It is very detail oriented. And I forgot, I remember once you told me when we were at a party that look, let's not go over here to have a conversation, which will be easier for me. So I've completely forgotten about that. But now that I'm thinking back on the book, there's so many descriptions there that somebody who was hearing, let's just say, may have not felt a need to see those things because they were actually hearing, they could hear the sounds around them or things like that. But this was like completely detailed of what was going on. The sounds that were around were written and drawn and things like that. And I think it became a richer story for having that because you really felt like you were in the place.
Thank you. Yeah, that's always my goal, to just drag the reader right in there with me.
Yeah. So you were also a teacher for a very long time. And how did that impact your writing? Was it what you saw children taking away from books, what they saw and what they missed? Like what happened with you being a teacher?
Yeah. I was a 3rd and 4th grade teacher for many years. I was an instructional coach helping principals and teachers with curriculum. And I was a Title I reading coordinator, which helped organize and worked with our government programs that funded reading programs for families who are in poverty. And so, very different perspectives, the classroom and then the district level. And as a parent, I just loved reading. When I finally figured out how to read, I never looked back. And that's all I really wanted to give to my students, is find a way to get them to enjoy and love reading as much as I did. And so, it's about choosing the books that you want to read and helping them figure out what they want to read. And that, yes, we have books that we have to read for school, but it's more important to find books that they want to read that fit them. And so that was really important to me because we still do that today. When we're looking for our next read, we want to find the book we want to read. And so I try to write the books that I want to read.
I have 2 thoughts on that. My mom was a teacher. She taught 2nd grade because she said by 3rd grade, they started to get fresh. and she didn't want that. She wanted them to still be innocent in second grade. So third and fourth is challenging, very, very challenging, that tween kind of moving into kind of years and, who they want to be and things. And I think you're touching on a big point. And I have such a huge problem with this, of what is assigned reading as opposed to what children want to read. My younger son read a book every day in middle school, and he got to high school and there was assigned reading in class. And that was it. And I think he read a couple of books the first week of college for fun. I think they were Dan Brown books just because, he happened to have something around. And since then he hasn't read. And it kills me because he had series books. I bring books home for him. It was completely. And I think it's just such a problem because we have so many children who love reading. And did you see that in the classroom of, I can't read this book, but I'll be happy to read everything else?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, as in the classroom, when, you're working with large number of kids and you have a, curriculum and state standards, and which are, all have their place. It's such a fine dance in putting it all together. But if this child loves, fantasy or graphic novels, it's so, you want to get them that into their hands. And so that's why that part of teaching kids how to find books that they love and to choose those for when they have free time to read, so they don't hate reading, because that's the last thing, educators want to do, is to have kids turn away from books. So it's a fine dance for sure, for teachers and finding just the right book for each child.
Our high school started introducing in each of the quarters that people were reading, there was a graphic novel. And it was really nice to see that was being introduced into the curriculum instead of, and it was just, whether you liked it or not, it was educating you about the format and educating you about that this is available and you can love it. But it's the same thing as you may love fantasy, or you may love horror, or you may love sci-fi or historical fiction. When you're first reading as a child, you don't really know you're reading historical fiction. You don't know what you're reading, just reading a book you love. And I just felt it was so great to introduce something completely different on many, many planes to students.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a big point too, giving kids and students the opportunity to read so many different genres, that you're not tied to one or the other, and, opening their eyes a little bit to what's out there. And I think that's why one of the reasons I, loved reading and turned to reading is that my parents, we always had books in the house. We didn't have a lot of money, but we always had books and we could always get to the library. And they let me read what I wanted to read, which wasn't always easy for my, pretty conservative Catholic parents. But, when my mom caught me reading the Thornbirds, in middle school, she about had a heart attack. And I'm like, but Mom, this is the third time I've read it. But, they let me read the books I wanted to read, the scary books, the mystery books, the, everything. And that was important, I think.
Yeah, we used to have the bookmobile. Used to come past our house, and we used to go to the bookmobile, or I take the bus downtown. We didn't live in a big town, but it was the bus downtown to go to the library. And I remember when they built the new library. Now, when I go there, I'm like, wow, how old is the new library? It's not the new library anymore. But I was the same way, because I would pick up books that they didn't think my parents would read. Does your mother know you're reading this? I'm like, yes. Because it was an easier answer than trying to explain. I'm just going to go home and read. It's not going to be a big deal. It's on that shelf. It's on the shelf down there. And I'm like, well, okay. I still want to read it.
That's right. Isn't the bookmobile the best thing ever? We didn't have those. I taught at a little country school when I first started my second and third and fourth year of teaching and on for a while. And we had this little bookmobile that pulled up once a month, and it was the best. And
the bookmobile used to do this thing where it would go down. It was this, it would come in and it would hiss. And then you would know you were almost ready to go on, because ours, it was so high. I guess it had to come down. And then they put out the steps. I mean, I just remember this, and this was a long time ago, and then you just get on, and where they would check the books out was in the back or whatever. And I don't know. I just feel in some ways, I wish we would bring things like that back, because it was, yes, going to the library was great, but this other way of doing it made it even cooler if that was entirely possible.
An ice cream truck for books. So.
Exactly. So was this always the title of the book? Was it always The Overnight Guest?
No. So I am the worst at titles, the worst. And so after a couple books, I just started calling it book 3, book 4, book 5, until it was time to start naming it. But for The Overnight Guest, we ended up calling it the Snow Book for a long time. When we were communicating, that my editor and I would call it the Snow Book, which is stuck for a long time, but we knew that couldn't quite be the title. So that idea came from my editor, and it was perfect. It just kind of encompassed everything for the book. So
it encompasses, when people read, they're going to see both time areas. It's just going to do the whole thing. It's great.
Right.
About the cover, like, did you know this was the cover? Was this the first cover you saw, or what was it?
Yeah, there was a version of it that they've tweaked it, so like some of the writing is yellow now, but that was it, and it was perfect. That's what I envisioned for the farmhouse, the snow. The art department does such a great job. They just really get me in what my vision is, and nailed it. Yeah, so happy with it.
No, it's really, really great. It's really terrific. And yes, the snow completely embodies what's going on. It's perfect time of year. If we're reading this in the summer, it wouldn't be the same. This is definitely your winter book. You think about that.
Yeah, I think so. I think while it does have the summer scenes, it just seems like this is the winter it's a perfect time to curl up with something warm to drink and sit by the fire or a blanket and just escape for a while.
That's exactly what I did. It was like, my husband goes, it's like the coldest temperature. And I said, I'm just going to sit here and read this freezing cold book. I'm like, right there. So how about the audio? Brittany Presley is the U.S. narrator. Did you have a hand in selecting her? Did you pick who your narrator was?
When my publisher said, how about Brittany? Because she's done some of my books in the past. I'm like, I love Brittany. She's perfect. And she nails it. Always nails it every single time. I'm so happy with that.
Are you an audio listener beyond so you love listening to audio. So you know when they're good.
Yeah, absolutely. I take my Lolo and I go for walks a lot, and I'll listen to audiobooks, and you're right. The narrator makes or breaks it for the audiobooks.
Yeah. So, and when it's dead on, it is so good. And when it's not, we just ignore. We just go to something else, you know? Yes. So I looked at your tour page, and it looks like you're going to do some live events. Live, that 4-letter word, live.
I know. So doing a few Iowa bookstores that, I've had relationships with in the past, and, going to be very safe and, watching numbers and masks and all that good stuff. But I'm very excited, so excited to be able to see people in person. So I've got a few here, and one in Arizona. I'm going to, my sister lives there. And so I'm going to go there, and I'm going to swing by. So very excited. And, but lots of online things as well. So there's something for everybody, whatever, people's comfort level is.
And I like that, because I like that there's a blend, and I'm hoping that going forward, there continues to be a blend, because we found with our readers, there's so many people that would never see an author event, like where they live. I mean, it's not going to happen, and they're going to have to travel an hour to go see it or whatever. And this has been really nice. And I've been saying to people, they're the kind of experiences you sit and just remember later. And it brings so much more context to the book, whether you haven't read it yet, or perhaps you have, and you want to sit there and have the experience of chatting with the author about it. And each has its rewards. Each is great.
Yeah, I agree. And, it's been so much fun to be able to connect with readers from all over in that way. And
Linwood Barker was funny last year. He says, I went on tour and missed no flights, and I didn't get up at 4 a.m., but I was on tour. I was on tour for a month.
That's right.
And there are all those things as well. And it's, yes, you can't go sign a book quite the same way, and you can't do those kind of things the same way, but to be able to reach this large range of people in a very short amount of time. And also we have a joke because I do a number of library events, and the weather has such an impact on events. Yeah. So if it rains or snows, nobody's going to show up. So you're there with 4 people, even though you got up at 4 a.m. to be there. Right. If it's a really nice night and it's been raining all summer, nobody's there. So we said that what we're always looking for is slight drizzle or just cloudy. Like, especially if you're at the beach, if it's a cloudy day, you got like a chance of people coming, and you don't really think about that for a live event. I mean, sometimes it'd be at 7 o'clock, and that's the time where people are still eating dinner and I've sort of figured out the online time when we do evening events is 8 o'clock. It's not 7, because 8 o'clock is 5 in the West. But for a lot of the East Coast people, you're past dinner, and at 7 in the Midwest, you're past dinner. Right. And it just has a different thing than starting at 7. Yeah. And I'm going against what most people are doing at this point, but I just feel like 8 kind of works.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and about the weather, I have an event coming up in a few days, and the forecast is for 20 below. So I don't, hopefully people will, bundle up and coming out, but it's okay if they don't,
I think they should just send notes out to everybody. Come out. You'll experience the book in a whole new way.
Perfect. That's great.
Got to be there because it's the tone, everybody. If you go home freezing and your car battery is going, you're at exactly the right point for reading this book. We've set you up.
Brilliant. I'm going to, on social media, I'll put that out.
I think you need to do that. It's like, guys, I'm setting the tone. I'm setting the tone here. So besides this, you've been hosting a show with Kimberly Bell and Carol Fitzgerald, which I caught one episode of. Now, how did that come about? Tell us more about the show and what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so it's called Killer Author Club, and Carol Ruda and Kimberly Bell and myself, we get together every couple of weeks, and we talk about, we'll invite guests on. Right now, it came about because we all have books coming out at the same time. And so Kara reached out to me and Kimberly, and we were like on board, let's do this. So we've got a killer author with a killer book, a killer cocktail, and a killer giveaway. And so it's, just a kind of a light take on our thrillers. And every episode we have a question that we ask the author, who do you kill? And so the author has to, what kind of people do they kill? Who are the victims in the books? How do you kill? Right. Why do you kill? And so it's kind of this dark topics, but done in a fun way. And so yeah, we had Kara's episode and Kimberly's episodes already. Mine's coming up next week, so we'll talk about the overnight guest there. And then we have some great authors coming on afterwards too. And we're kind of making that more of a surprise, but some really exciting authors who will be joining us. And it's a lot of fun. So it's on Facebook and YouTube. And then we add it over to Instagram.
Great. And it runs, do you have a set day of the week?
Yeah, so it's the first and third Tuesdays of the month.
At what time?
9 Eastern.
9 Eastern, yeah.
8 Central and 6 Pacific, because we're on 3 different time zones.
Right. Good time. Another good time is 9, because that's the reason I tuned in. I was just like, oh, I guess if they're and watch this now. Yeah. This is good. This is a good time for me. It's either that or I'm going to go watch something on TV. Right. Night, I can't, there's a lot of times I read more on the weekends than I read during the week, just because I just need to get away from like looking at things or thinking the way I've been thinking. So you also speak with book clubs. And if people want to talk to you about this book, I take it they should wait till after the tour. Like, are you doing book clubs while you're on tour, or you take a little hiatus just so we get people in the right direction? Because I noticed you've got that on your website, but let's be clear on what we're doing, folks.
Yeah. So the next couple of weeks are kind of busy, next few weeks, but I always welcome. I love talking with book clubs. And again, that's that intimate, if we do it online, it's that intimate, way of doing it, which is great. Or if it's nearby, I'm able to do, local ones in person if people are comfortable with that, which people have not been as of late. But I'm looking out a few weeks before I can really start scheduling that for the new book. But I do have some scheduled, people looking ahead that they're planning on reading the book with their group. And we plan it, schedule about a half hour to an hour, and it's always so much fun.
And you learn so many things about your book that you just didn't know.
Yeah, that's right. Because usually by then everybody's read it and I can tell them some of the cutting floor scenes and such, and get into some of the nitty gritty of the book.
Yeah. And why I wrote this and where it went and things like that. So if people want to do that after the tour, that's what they should do. So now the big question is, what's next for you?
Oh, I'm just finishing up my 10th book. I'm so excited about it. It's a little different, well, quite a bit different for me. Although one of the characters is from Iowa, she steps out of Iowa and the story takes place elsewhere. And I can't say a whole lot, but I can say that she meets some of the most diabolical characters I've ever written, and it's a wild ride.
Oh, wow. Well, so same time next year for this book?
I don't know for sure, that we don't have a set pub date for it.
Okay.
But usually mine are about a year to 18 months after the one that's coming out. So.
Okay. All right. So set in a different place. Ooh.
Yeah. So something new.
Yeah. Something different. As always, I'm so glad to talk to you, especially after racing through this last week. And I'm just telling people, if you want to read something where it really is just going to take you away, this is the book, because you're just going to pick up, and the way the threads all come together. I didn't even talk about, there's one part of the book that's in italics and you don't really know what the italic part is. So we really have these three parts that are coming together, and the way it all works, when I went back and I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And there are things that I thought I should have caught and I didn't. So just know that I missed. And that's a sign of a really good writer,
Thank you. Well, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. And it's always so much fun catching up with you.
So great to see you. Hopefully next time we'll see each other with a cocktail and a canopy in our hands and go on from there. So
that's what we're hoping for.
So thank you so much for joining us. And to our readers, we look forward to seeing you next time on Book Reporter Talks To.